We're here at the RNC with old friend Michael Isikoff, Chief Investigative Correspondent for Yahoo. First of all, I didn't know we had investigative correspondents left in the country. You're one of three left.
One of three who claim to be. Look, actually, I think a lot of people are still doing investigative reporting and some impressive work out there. But look, it's a tough environment.
Yes.
Yeah,
so now you work at Yahoo today.
Yes.
Do we know who you're going to work for tomorrow yet, or no?
I believe today is the deadline for bids for people who want to buy Yahoo. So those of us who work there are sort of anxiously waiting to see who's the highest bidder.
All right, so guys, go to tytnetwork.com/join, become a member, and let's buy Yahoo. Wait, today was the last day. Oh man, we're gonna miss it.
Well,
okay.
So, Rush, let's stop the interview. Get your bid in right now. Come on.
All right, so let's talk investigative reporting here at RNC. I know you talked to Michael Flynn a little bit earlier. Let's start there and
sure.
talk about what's happening at the convention. Okay.
Sure. Michael Flynn, who is the former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, has basically been Donald Trump's top foreign policy advisor, national security advisor, for months now. He talked a bit about that, how he's been talking to Trump since last February. Widely was thought to be on the vice presidential shortlist. Widely thought to be possible director of national intelligence if Trump were elected. So he wanted to talk about his new book and his which talks about going after radical Islam, why we need a new multi-pronged war against radical Islam, and I talked to him about that. But I asked him some questions that he was not as happy to talk about, which is his relationship with RT, the Russian TV station. Last December, he flew over to Moscow to participate in the 10th anniversary celebration of RT, and then went to a big gala dinner where he sat next to Vladimir Putin. Look, RT is the propaganda arm of the Russian government. Having Flynn there was a propaganda coup for the Russians to get a former top intelligence official of the United States government appearing on RT and speaking at one of its events. I asked him if he had been paid by RT for that. And he was not a question he wanted to answer. He initially said no, and when I pressed him, he said, well, you'll have to speak to my speakers bureau about that, which is a pretty telling comment.
Yes.
I tried to find out.
The speakers bureaus, just if you don't know, don't usually have a rate of $0.
Yeah, right. No. It was so clearly money changed hands, and the more you think about it, this is no small thing. I mean, for multiple reasons. Look, have been a series of questions about Trump and his top people and their relationship with the Russians. Paul Manafort, who's running Trump's campaign, was for years the top political consultant to Yanukovych, the pro-Putin guy, former president of the Ukraine who got booted out. Manafort, as I and some others have reported, has had extensive financial dealings with a number of Russian oligarchs close to Putin. Firtash, who's Dmitry Firtash, who's under indictment in the United States on bribery charges. Manafort was in business with Firtash. He was in business with Deripaska, another extremely wealthy Russian oligarch. So on its face, you have these questions about the relationships in the Trump camp with the Russians. You put on top of that Trump's own comments about raising questions about how the NATO alliance needs to be revisited. You look at
Excuse me.
you look at some of the relatively benign things he's said about Putin that has given a lot of people unease. And then I'll throw another wild one out there, but it's something a lot of people in the intelligence world are thinking about. We had this really fascinating report a couple of weeks ago about how Russian intelligence had hacked into the DNC's computers and
That's right, yep.
exfiltrated their Oppo files on Trump.
Yep.
And it wasn't limited to that. I can tell you that others, Democratic political committees, were also attacked by the Russian cyber hackers from Russian intelligence. The Clinton campaign was attacked by Russian intelligence, and I can tell you this is something the FBI has been looking at very closely. And one question is, what was the purpose? Was it simply to gather intelligence, or was it an effort to influence the election by providing Trump one way or another with some of the internal Democratic Party files? And when will they start to roll out? When might we, will they be posting this on the internet? So I think from a counterintelligence perspective, there are a lot of questions here.
So let me ask you about two of those. So way earlier in the campaign, Trump had spoken positively about Putin. Do you think that is in any way connected to any of this, or it's just a coincidence that Putin says something nice about him, he thinks great, he says something nice back, or is that the Manafort hiring in any way related to that?
Look, as you know, it's very hard to know with Trump whether he's just shooting from his hip, talking about whatever comes to his mind at that moment, or whether there's something behind it. And I'm saying that certainly Manafort's relationships in Moscow and in Kiev have not gone unnoticed by Trump. So is there more to it? I think any U.S. counterintelligence person looking at this is going to have a lot of questions and want to know more. It would have been more. I think I got something out of Flynn today, but I would like to have known how much was he paid. I would like to have known, does he have an ongoing financial relationship with RT? Because he appears as a semi-regular on RT. What's that all about? That's not a question that's going to necessarily determine the outcome of this election, but it is worth knowing. And if Trump were to get elected, these questions that I put to Flynn, he's going to face a lot more closely in a confirmation hearing and an FBI background check.
All right, one more thing about Michael Flynn. So I just saw him in an article today mentioned as possible defense secretary for
Right.
Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So who is the real Michael Flynn? And how do we know about any of these generals? Because when they work for Democrats, they say, oh, no, waterboarding is torture and we're not going to do it and it's unacceptable. They turn around and then later say, oh, I'm working for a Republican.
I asked him about waterboarding today, and he said, look, all options are on the table and need to be on the table. So he would not rule out a resumption of waterboarding, which, we've almost become inured to it, but a year ago, that would have been stunning news that the top foreign policy advisor to one of the two candidates for president is leaving the door open to reviving techniques that the U.S. government pretty much had concluded was the equivalent of torture. So are we going to be back in the torture business? Now, he said, look, we are in a war here, and these people are a direct threat to us, and if that's what's needed to get the intelligence we need to keep the options open. That's what he said, but it is it's noteworthy stuff.
So let's now go to a broader question. As I'm looking at Chris Christie, if Donald Trump wins, okay, deeply embarrassed that he wasn't picked as vice president, openly campaigning for it, said he would be upset if he didn't get it, doesn't get it, obviously upset. But if Donald Trump wins and he makes him Attorney General, okay, he's right back in the ballgame. I mean, he's Attorney General of the United States, and then he becomes an important and interesting political figure going forward. But that's not what I'm asking about. What if they lose? Do the Chris Christies of the world and everyone who attached themselves to Donald Trump, Michael Flynn's, the Mike Pence's, etc., do they become a bit of a joke? Like those crazy guys, who threw their lot in with this madman Donald Trump.
Look, this has been such a wild year that, I mean, who knows? I mean, I will say a couple things. One is, if Trump wins, Chris Christie as Attorney General, Mike Flynn as Director of National Intelligence. I think there's a tradition that we don't appoint generals as Secretary of Defense. That there's a tradition of
what
civilian.
Tradition does Trump
I know.
listen
All
to?
right, but in any case,
Yeah.
they still have to get confirmed by the Senate. And there will be, we'll see how the Senate plays out. But they'll have to undergo background checks. Chris Christie has the Bridgegate trial coming up in September. I am astounded that he remained on the short list, given that is looming over him. I mean, if nothing else, as you know, a trial, a criminal trial, even though Christie's not going to be on trial, one of his deputy chief of staff is one of his top guys at the Port Authority is going to be a witness against the deputy chief of staff, and one of his top political guys is going to be on trial. So that's going to suck up a lot of media oxygen. It's hard to see how Christie could have credibly been the vice presidential nominee and then having to sit or having the media cover that Bridgegate trial coming up. Not to mention, one of his closest confidants, David Sampson, just pled guilty, last week.
On the same day that it was leaked that Pence would be the VP and not Christie. Not a good day for Chris Christie.
In an investigation that grew out of the Bridgegate matter. But look, how much does Trump lose by if he loses? Is it a landslide, Goldwater type election, or is it close? If it's close, then none of these people go away. I mean, they become the loyal opposition, and we'll be hearing from them quite a bit.
Well, then that leads obviously to the next question, which is Trump in the middle of changing the face of the Republican Party? If this is the new guard and they're not going away, even if they lose.
He's changed the face of the Republican Party. You could see it here this week. I mean, these are Trump people, and everybody's, cowed and in line. And, it's astounding. You had Paul Manafort today saying on the Today Show that Governor John Kasich, the Republican governor of Ohio, is an embarrassment to his state because he's not coming to the convention. I mean, that's a pretty astounding thing to say about the sitting governor of the state, of a crucial swing state. If nothing else, you would think Trump people would still be trying to woo Kasich. They need Ohio.
They don't know what they're doing. He's shooting from the hip. So, but then that leads again to the same topic.
But Manafort Trump is supposed to be the guy shooting from the hip.
Oh,
Manafort is supposed to be the political pro who is trying to make the trains run on time, and make this thing work. So,
but he reports up to Trump, and if Trump said no, I don't like Kasich, let's call him out. What's he going to do? He's got to listen to what his boss says. But Mike, that's exactly what at this point is so up in the air. We knew what the Republican Party stood for before Trump. We knew all their talking points, we knew all their agendas, and you knew where they stood on the Middle East, on taxes, on trade, etc. Now, the new Republican Party, we don't know where it stands at all because it depends on the fickle mind of Donald Trump. It could be for something today and against it tomorrow. So if he leaves the scene, what's left behind?
I mean, that is an excellent question. Trump is so malleable, and the Republican Party has been so malleable in accommodating itself to a guy who on so many issues would seem to be disqualifying to Republicans. I mean, on free trade. I mean, look, the Republican Party has been consistently for free trade agreements, on foreign policy, where Trump says these things that seem to be favorable to Putin and accommodating and talking about taking another look at the NATO alliance. I mean, that's something that to Republican Party dogma, foreign policy establishment would seem to be heretical. So I'm astounded at how many people, including Mike Pence, the vice presidential pick, are willing to go along with a guy who's said things, who, if a Democrat was saying things, they would be denouncing.
Yep.
Right?
So I think that there's
But
only
winners,
one core
it's
of
about winning, as Trump will tell you.
Yeah. I think there's only one core left of the Republican Party, because what the Republicans used to say is, oh, we know our voters, and our voters are for free trade. Well, it turns out that's not true. Our voters are against Putin. Our voters want to be one-sided, not even-handed on Israel, right? Our voters want this, our voters want that. Well, it turns out none of those things are true. Their voters didn't want any of that.
Right.
They didn't care about any of that. I think the only thing that remains is anger.
Yeah.
And
I think that's very astute. I think that what it really shows is in some ways the poverty of the Republican Party's traditional dogma, right? That it didn't really connect with voters in a way that was meaningful, because otherwise, they couldn't possibly be going along with this guy, right? I mean,
Yep.
it's just he's. I mean, look, to go from, think back a couple of cycles, George W. Bush, 2004. What was that election about? That was, a real foreign policy election, and hardcore on a lot of issues that Trump doesn't seem to care about, including, dismissive of the war in Iraq, calling it a strategic mistake and saying he was against it from the beginning.
Not only that it was a lie, which is much bolder.
Right. If you had been at the Republican convention in 2004 and said things like that,
you'd have been run out of the building.
Been run out of the building. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we live in interesting times. So we'll
Yes, we
see
do.
what this week is all about. We'll see how they coalesce that anger into some sort of policy.
Yeah.
And we'll see what the Republican Party is after Trump. And
It's
you're
going to be
right, Mike.
very interesting to watch.
Yeah, no one's got the answers yet, but
Yeah.
it's a hell of a movie. So can't wait to see the ending. All right, Mike Isikoff, thank you so
All
much.
right,
Really
thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Good to be with you.